Look at this face. It was carved into a tree before there were farms. Before there were cities. Before anyone on Earth had invented writing. It is staring back at you across 12,500 years, from the end of the last ice age. It is taller than a house, covered in faces and symbols nobody alive can read, and it was pulled out of a Russian swamp in pieces. This is the Shigir Idol. The oldest wooden monument on the planet. And it is keeping a secret. The year is 1890. In the Ural Mountains of Russia, gold miners are digging through a peat bog at a place called Shigir, east of the mountains, where the land turns to swamp. For meters down, in the wet black peat, they hit wood. Not a log. Carved wood, blackened with age, covered in deliberate marks. They bring it up in fragments, not really knowing what they have. Piece by piece, it is reassembled into a single towering figure. A wooden idol, standing taller than any man, with a carved head and a body covered in patterns. Nobody, in 1890, has any idea how old it truly is. Here is the first miracle. Wood rots. Bury a carving like this in ordinary soil, and within a few centuries it is gone, eaten by fungus and bacteria and air. But the Shigir Idol was not buried in ordinary soil. It was swallowed by a peat bog. A bog is waterlogged, acidic, and starved of oxygen, and almost nothing can live in it to do the rotting. Peat is nature's deep freeze. It is the same chemistry that preserves the so-called bog bodies of Europe, faces and skin intact after thousands of years. The Shigir bog took a piece of carved wood from the Stone Age and simply held it, patient and airless, until the miners came. Look at what they pulled out. The idol was carved from a single trunk of larch, a tree that was already old when it was felled. Originally it stood more than 5 meters tall, taller than a giraffe, though only part of it survives today. The lower section was lost in the 20th century, and we know what it looked like only from an old drawing made before it vanished. Up and down the body run lines, zigzags, and chevrons, carved with stone tools and what may have been the sharpened jaw of a beaver. And set into the wood are faces. As many as 8 of them, each one different, each one watching, with a 3-dimensional head crowning the top. For a long time, nobody could say how old it was, and the guesses were cautious. When it was first carbon dated in the 1990s, the result, around 9,800 years, was already so extreme that many scholars refused to believe it. Surely Stone Age hunters could not have made something this complex. So in 2018, a team led by the German archaeologist Thomas Terberger ran the test again, this time with modern accelerator dating on the cleanest inner wood. The number that came back did not get smaller. It got bigger. Around 12,500 years old. Carved at the very end of the last ice age, as the glaciers were still pulling back across the north. Let that number find its place. The Great Pyramid of Giza is about 4,500 years old. Stonehenge, roughly the same. The first writing, in Mesopotamia, a little over 5,000 years. The Shigir Idol is more than twice the age of any of them. When this wooden giant was already standing in the Urals, the pyramids would not be built for another 8,000 years. There were no fields, no villages of mud brick, no kings. The people who made it were hunters and fishers and gatherers, moving across a cold landscape of birch and pine. And those people stood up a carved monument taller than 3 men. And that is what makes this object dangerous to a tidy story. For most of the last century, the textbook said something simple. First came farming. Farming gave people surplus food, settled towns, free time, and only then, with all of that, came art, religion, and monuments. Symbolic thought was supposed to be the reward for civilization. But the Shigir Idol was made by exactly the wrong kind of people, thousands of years too early. Hunter-gatherers, with no farms and no cities, sat down with stone tools and carved a towering figure dense with meaning. It is not alone. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, foragers raised massive carved stone pillars in the same deep past. The order we were taught may be backwards. Now the real mystery. Those faces, those endless zigzags and lines, are not random decoration. They are too consistent, too deliberate for that. Researchers who have studied the idol for years, including the curator Svetlana Savchenko, believe the markings carry meaning. A message. Information, encoded in wood, by people who had no writing to leave it any other way. Some have called it the oldest text in the world, except we lost the language 12,000 years ago. We can see that the idol is trying to tell us something. We simply cannot read it. The grammar is gone. The dictionary is gone. Only the faces remain, still patiently saying their piece to anyone who stops to look. So what could it mean? Nobody knows, and that is exactly why it pulls at us. Some think the faces are spirits or ancestors, a family of gods carved into a single pole. Some think the lines are a boundary marker, a warning, a this far and no further to anyone entering a sacred place. Others read it as a story, a creation myth, or even a kind of map of their world, upper and lower, the living and the dead, stacked from the ground to the head at the top. Every one of these is a guess. The honest answer is that a group of Ice Age hunters knew precisely what each mark meant, and took that knowledge with them. We are looking at their certainty, and feeling only our own questions. The Shigir Idol survived the bog for 12,000 years. It nearly did not survive us. Part of it was lost in the upheavals of the last century, which is why the bottom is known only from that single old drawing. What remains now stands upright in a climate-controlled glass case in the regional museum in Ekaterinburg, in the Ural city closest to where it was found. People come to stand in front of it the way you might stand in front of a relative you never met. It is the single oldest piece of monumental art that human hands have ever made and that we still have. Everything older than it, in wood, is gone. The bog gave us exactly one. We like to believe that deep symbolic thought, art with meaning, is a recent thing, a sign of how far we have come. The Shigir Idol disagrees. 12,500 years ago, before a single seed was ever planted, people in the Urals looked at the world, felt something enormous about it, and carved that feeling into a tree 5 meters tall. Then they wrote a message on it that we are still trying to read. So the next time someone tells you the Stone Age was simple, picture that face in the wood, staring back across the Ice Age. The carvings are real, the dating is published, and the idol is still standing. Go look it up for yourself, and decide what it was trying to say. I am August Vane. Watch the ground.